Throughout history, kings have ruled empires with unmatched power, shaping nations and changing the world forever. From fearless conquerors to legendary rulers, these kings were more than just leaders. They were forces of history. Today we'll uncover the top 10 most powerful kings in history. And you won't believe who makes it to number 1. King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King. In the long history of Europe, few kings are remembered as strongly as Louis XIV of France, also called the Sun King. He ruled for more than 72 years, which makes him one of the longest-reigning monarchs in history. Imagine a king who stayed in power from when he was just a boy until he was an old man, guiding his country through wars, cultural changes, and political struggles. That was Louis XIV. Louis became king at the age of 4 years old after the death of his father. Of course, at that young age, he could not rule by himself. Advisors and ministers managed things for him until he was old enough. But as he grew up, Louis showed he was not an ordinary ruler. He believed that kings were chosen by God to lead, and that no one else had the right to challenge his authority. This belief is known as the divine right of kings. Because of this, he expected complete loyalty and obedience from his people. One of the most famous things about Louis XIV was his love for power and grandeur. He built the Palace of Versailles, a massive and beautiful palace outside Paris. Versailles was more than just a home. It was a symbol of his absolute power. The palace had gold decorations, huge gardens, fountains, and rooms filled with art and luxury. To this day, Versailles is one of the most famous palaces in the world. By building it, Louis wanted to show not only France, but all of Europe, that he was the center of power. Just like the sun is the center of the solar system. That is why he called himself the Sun King. Louis XIV also controlled the nobles of France very carefully. In the past, nobles had a lot of power and could even challenge the king. But Louis was clever, invited them to live at Versailles, where they spent their time in parties, dances, and ceremonies. While they were busy enjoying the luxuries of the palace, Louis kept real political power in his own hands. This way, he weakened the nobles' independence and strengthened the monarchy. When it came to war, Louis XIV was bold and ambitious. He expanded France's borders and fought many battles with neighboring countries. These wars made France stronger for a time, but they also cost the nation a lot of money. Still, during Louis's rule, France became one of the most powerful and influential countries in Europe. His armies were feared, and his diplomats were respected. Another thing Louis XIV is remembered for is his support of arts and culture. He loved music, theater, and painting. Under his rule, French culture flourished. Many artists, writers, and musicians created masterpieces, and France became the cultural leader of Europe. Even fashion and style were influenced by Louis's court. The way people dressed, spoke, and behaved at Versailles became a model for the rest of Europe. However, Louis's rule also had dark sides. His wars and his expensive palace drained France's treasury. By the end of his reign, many common people were poor and burdened with heavy taxes. This laid the groundwork for future problems in France, including the French Revolution about a century later. Still, no one can deny the power Louis XIV held during his time. He turned France into a strong, centralized state, and his name remains one of the most famous in European history. He showed the world what it meant to be an absolute monarch, ruling with full authority. Dazzling displays of wealth, and a belief that he was the living symbol of his nation. Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongol Empire. When we talk about powerful kings, it is impossible to ignore Genghis Khan, the man who built the largest land empire the world has ever seen. Born in 1162 on the cold and open plains of Mongolia, Genghis Khan was not born into wealth or comfort. His real name was Temujin, and his early life was full of struggles. His father was poisoned by enemies, and his family was left poor, abandoned, and fighting for survival. But these hardships shaped him into a strong and fearless leader. As a young man, Temujin gathered friends, allies, and warriors around him. He was known for his intelligence, bravery, and ability to inspire loyalty. Unlike many leaders of his time, Genghis valued talent over noble birth. This means he chose his generals and commanders based on their skills, not just because they were from rich or powerful families. This gave him a huge advantage, because his army was filled with capable fighters who trusted him. In 1206, Temujin united the Mongol tribes under his rule and took the title Genghis Khan, which means universal ruler. From this moment, his empire began to grow at lightning speed. The Mongol warriors were some of the greatest horsemen in history. They could ride for days, move quickly across vast distances, and shoot arrows with deadly accuracy, even while riding at full speed. Genghis Khan trained his army to use these skills to overwhelm enemies. What made Genghis Khan so powerful was not just his military strength, but also his strategic mind. He used clever tactics like fake retreats to trick enemies into traps. He spread fear by showing no mercy to those who resisted him. But at the same time, he was smart enough to welcome those who surrendered. This mix of fear and fairness helped him conquer huge lands. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire stretched from China in the east to Eastern Europe in the west. No empire before had expanded so fast. He defeated powerful dynasties in China, destroyed great cities in Central Asia, and even challenged the mighty Islamic empires of the Middle East. His name alone became a symbol of terror and respect. But Genghis Khan was not only a conqueror, he also knew how to govern, created laws called the Yasa, which brought order to his vast empire. He encouraged trade along the Silk Road, connecting Asia and Europe. This made the Mongol Empire an important bridge between East and West. Ideas, goods, and technologies traveled safely under his rule. One surprising fact is that Genghis Khan allowed freedom of religion in his empire. People could worship their gods without fear of punishment. This was rare in a time when most rulers forced their religion on others. Of course, Genghis Khan's conquests caused massive destruction. Cities were burned, populations were wiped out, and millions died during his campaigns. Yet, history cannot deny his impact. He changed the course of world history and created an empire that lasted long after his death in 1227. Even today, Genghis Khan is remembered in many ways. In Mongolia, he is seen as a national hero, the father of the nation. In other parts of the world, he is remembered as a ruthless conqueror. But one thing is clear: his power, leadership, and achievements make him one of the most significant kings in history. In less than 25 years, Genghis Khan went from a poor, abandoned boy to the ruler of the largest empire ever known. His story is a reminder of how determination, intelligence, courage can change the fate of not just one person, but of entire nations. Alexander the Great, the King of Macedonia. Few names in history shine as brightly as Alexander the Great. Born in 356 BCE in the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, Alexander became one of the most famous military leaders the world has ever seen. By the time he died at just 32 years old, he had built an empire that stretched from Greece all the way to India. In such a short life, he changed the world forever. From a young age, Alexander was different. His father, King Philip II of Macedonia, was a strong leader who had already expanded Macedonia's power. But Alexander also had a very special teacher, the famous philosopher Aristotle. From him, Alexander learned about science, philosophy, literature, and leadership. This mix of education and royal training prepared him to think like both a warrior and a scholar. When his father was assassinated in 336 BCE, Alexander became king at only 20 years old. Many thought he was too young to lead, but Alexander quickly proved them wrong. His first step was to crush rebellions in Greece. Once he had secured his homeland, he turned his attention to the mighty Persian Empire, one of the largest and richest empires at the time. What made Alexander so powerful was his genius on the battlefield. He used smart tactics, speed, and creativity to defeat much larger armies. At the famous Battle of Issus in 333 BCE, Alexander faced King Darius III of Persia, who had a far bigger army. Yet Alexander's strategy and determination led to a stunning victory. Darius fled the battlefield, leaving his family behind. This was a turning point that showed the world Alexander's strength. Step by step, Alexander conquered the Persian Empire, capturing its cities and wealth. His victories at battles like Gaugamela in 331 BCE made him master of lands stretching across Asia Minor, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. In Egypt, he founded the city of Alexandria, which later became a great center of learning and culture. Alexander was not only a conqueror, but also a visionary leader. He He wanted to unite the different peoples of his empire.
Ow.
He encouraged marriages between his soldiers and local women, adopted some customs of the Persians, and spread Greek culture across Asia. This cultural blending became known as the Hellenistic Age, where Greek language, art, and science mixed with other traditions to create something new and lasting. However, Alexander's ambition seemed endless, pushed further east, reaching as far as India. In 326 BCE, at the Battle of the Hydaspes River, he faced King Porus of India. The battle was fierce, and Porus fought bravely with his war elephants. Alexander won, but he admired Porus so much that he allowed him to continue ruling as his ally. This showed that Alexander respected strong and honorable leaders, even among his enemies. But even the greatest kings face limits. Alexander's soldiers, tired from years of fighting, refused to march further into Asia. Reluctantly, Alexander turned back. In 323 BCE, while in the city of Babylon, he suddenly fell ill and died at the age of just 32. His death shocked the world. Without his leadership, his empire quickly broke apart. Even though his empire did not last, Alexander's legacy lived on, spread Greek culture, language, and ideas across 3 continents. Cities he founded became centers of trade and learning. Historians often call him one of the greatest military minds in history. Alexander the Great remains a symbol of courage, ambition, and vision. In just over a decade, he achieved what most leaders could not accomplish in a lifetime. His story reminds us how one person's dream and determination can shape the entire course of history. King Ashoka, the Great, the Emperor of India, among the greatest rulers in history. Ashoka the Great of India stands out, not just for the size of his empire, but also for the way he transformed as a king. Born around 304 BCE, Ashoka was the grandson of Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Maurya dynasty. When Ashoka came to power, he inherited one of the largest empires in India, but under his rule, it became even more powerful and famous. In the early part of his reign, Ashoka was known as a fierce and ruthless conqueror. He wanted to expand his empire and make it the strongest in the region. His most famous campaign was against the state of Kalinga, located on the eastern coast of India. The Battle of Kalinga was brutal. Ancient records say that more than 100,000 people were killed, and many more were wounded or captured. Even though Ashoka won the war, the victory brought him no joy. Walking through the battlefield and seeing the countless dead, Ashoka was filled with guilt and sadness. The destruction of Kalinga changed him forever. He began to question his path of violence and conquest. From that point on, Ashoka turned away from war and chose a new way of ruling, a way based on peace, compassion, and justice. Ashoka became a devoted follower of Buddhism. Instead of using force to control his empire, he began to spread the teachings of kindness, tolerance, and nonviolence. He sent Buddhist missionaries to faraway lands including Sri Lanka, Central Asia, and even as far as Greece and Egypt. Because of him, Buddhism spread across Asia and became one of the world's major religions. To guide his people, Ashoka created a series of laws and principles known as the Edicts of Ashoka. These were carved into stone pillars and rocks all across his empire, so that everyone could see them. In these edicts, he encouraged people to live moral lives, respect one another, avoid unnecessary violence, and care for animals. He also promoted religious tolerance, saying that all faiths deserved respect. Ashoka cared deeply about the welfare of his people. He built roads, hospitals, rest houses, and wells to improve daily life. He ordered the planting of trees for shade along travel routes, and had water supplies built for both people and animals. In many ways, he was not only a king, but also a father figure to his empire, looking after the needs of his subjects. Yet Ashoka did not give up power completely. He remained a strong ruler, maintaining unity across a massive empire that stretched over most of the Indian subcontinent. His leadership showed the world that true strength does not always come from fear and war, but sometimes from compassion and wisdom. Ashoka died around 232 BCE, but his legacy lived on. Even today, in modern India, the lion capital of Ashoka is the national emblem. And his wheel of law, the Ashoka Chakra, is at the center of the Indian flag. This shows how much his influence is still respected thousands of years later. Ashoka the Great is remembered as one of the most powerful kings, not just because of his empire, but because of his remarkable transformation. He showed that a ruler could be both mighty and kind. His story proves that the greatest victories are not always won on battlefields. Sometimes, they are won in the human heart. Pharaoh Ramses to the great ruler of Egypt. When people think of ancient Egypt, they often imagine giant pyramids, powerful pharaohs, and golden treasures. Among all the pharaohs who ruled Egypt, one name stands above the rest. Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great. He ruled for 66 years. From 1279 BCE to 1213 BCE, making him one of the longest reigning kings in history. His time on the throne left behind some of the most famous monuments, battles, and legends of ancient Egypt. Ramses II came to power at a time when Egypt was already a strong empire, but he wanted to make it even greater. He was not just a ruler sitting on a throne, he was also a warrior king. One of his most famous battles was the Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, a powerful empire from Anatolia. Modern-day Turkey, the battle was massive, with thousands of soldiers and hundreds of chariots on both sides. At first, things looked bad for Ramses. His army was tricked and ambushed, and he found himself surrounded. But instead of panicking, Ramses fought with great courage. Ancient stories say he rode into battle on his chariot, shouting to his soldiers and rallying them to fight back. The Egyptians managed to push back the Hittites, and although the battle ended in a draw, Ramses declared it a great victory. Later, he even signed the world's first known peace treaty with the Hittites, a smart move that brought stability and respect to Egypt. Ramses II was not only a warrior, he was also a master builder. He wanted his name and power to be remembered forever, so he filled Egypt with monuments, temples, and statues. The most famous is the Abu Simbel temples. Carved into a mountain in southern Egypt, the entrance is guarded by 4 giant statues of Ramses himself, each sitting proudly as a reminder of his greatness. These statues are so large that they still amaze people today, more than 3,000 years later. He also expanded the Temple of Karnak, built the Ramesseum, a great mortuary temple in his honor, and restored many other monuments. Ramses made sure that his name was carved on walls, pillars, and statues all across Egypt. In fact, some say he had his name written on older monuments built by other pharaohs, just so people would always remember him. Ramses II also cared about family and legacy. He had many wives and over 100 children, which helped him strengthen political ties and ensured the royal bloodline. One of his most famous queens was Nefertari, for whom he built a beautiful temple at Abu Simbel. This showed his love and respect for her, something unusual for a time when queens were often forgotten in history. During his reign, Egypt was wealthy and stable. Trade flourished, cities grew, and Egyptian culture reached new heights. Ramses became a symbol of Egypt's glory, often called the Great Ancestor by later generations. Ramses II lived to be about 90 years old, which was incredibly rare in ancient times. When he died, his body was mummified and placed in the Valley of the Kings. Today, his mummy is preserved and displayed in Cairo, where millions of people have come to see the face of Egypt's most legendary ruler. Ramses II is remembered not only for his long reign and great battles, but also for his ambition to leave a lasting mark on history. His monuments still stand, his name is still spoken, and his story continues to inspire. Truly, he was one of the most powerful kings the world has ever known. Charlemagne, the father of Europe. When we talk about powerful kings who shaped the future of Europe, one name that cannot be ignored is Charlemagne, also called Charles the Great. He lived during the Middle Ages and ruled from 768 to 814 CE. Charlemagne was the king of the Franks, later became the king of the Lombards, and finally crowned as the first Holy Roman Emperor in 800 CE. Because of his leadership and influence, many historians call him the father of Europe. Charlemagne was born in 742 CE. At that time, Europe was not united. Instead, it was divided into many small kingdoms, tribes, and territories. Wars, invasions, and chaos were common. But Charlemagne changed all of that. From the moment he became king, he had a vision of building a strong Christian empire in Western Europe. He was a great warrior king, leading his armies in more than 50 battles during his reign. He expanded his kingdom to include most of modern-day France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Austria, and parts of Italy and Spain. His empire became the largest in Western Europe since the fall of the Roman Empire. Everywhere he went, Charlemagne demanded loyalty and respect. One of his biggest achievements was being crowned as Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III on Christmas Day in the year 800. This event was very symbolic. It showed that Charlemagne was not just a political leader, but also a defender of Christianity. It also connected him to the legacy of the ancient Roman emperors, giving him even more power and prestige. But Charlemagne's greatness was not only in war and politics. He cared deeply about education, culture, and religion. During his reign, he started what historians call the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of learning and culture in Europe. He invited scholars, teachers, and artists to his court. He supported the copying of ancient books, the teaching of reading and writing, and the spreading of knowledge. This helped preserve important ideas from Greece and Rome that might have been lost during the Dark Ages. Charlemagne also reformed the legal system. He wanted laws to be fair and consistent across his empire. He sent royal agents called missi dominici to travel through the empire and make sure local rulers were following his orders. This created a sense of order and unity in lands that had once been very divided. Another important part of his rule was his strong support of the Christian church. He built churches, supported missionaries, and worked to spread Christianity among the people he conquered. At times, he even forced people to convert, which showed both his dedication and his strict approach to religion. As a person, Charlemagne was described as tall, strong, and energetic. He loved hunting, horseback riding, and swimming. He was also deeply religious and believed he had been chosen by God to rule. Despite his power, he sometimes lived simply, eating plain food and wearing modest clothes compared to other kings of his time. Charlemagne died in 814 CE after ruling for more than 40 years. He was buried in Aachen in modern-day Germany, a city he had made his capital. His empire did not stay united for long after his death, but his legacy lived on. He had laid the foundation for what would later become modern European nations. Charlemagne is remembered today as a king who combined military strength with vision and wisdom, created a united Christian empire, promoted learning and culture, and influenced Europe for centuries to come. That is why he truly deserves his place as one of the most powerful kings in history. Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Persian Empire, in the 6th century BCE. A powerful king rose from the land of Persia who would forever change the history of the world. His name was Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. He is remembered not just as a conqueror, but also as a wise and fair ruler who built one of the largest empires in history. Cyrus was born around 600 BCE in the region we now call Iran. At that time, Persia was divided into small kingdoms and tribes. When Cyrus became king of a small Persian state, few people expected him to achieve anything great. But he had big dreams and incredible leadership skills. Slowly, he united the Persian tribes and built a powerful army. One of his first major victories was against the Median Empire, which ruled over Persia at the time. Instead of destroying the Medes, Cyrus joined their kingdom with his own and treated the people with respect. This smart decision helped him gain loyalty from his new subjects. From there, his power only grew. Cyrus went on to conquer Lydia in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, defeating King Croesus, who was famous for his wealth. Then he turned east and expanded into Central Asia. His greatest achievement came when he captured Babylon in 539 BCE, one of the most advanced and powerful cities of the ancient world. What made this conquest special was how he handled it. Instead of burning the city or enslaving its people, Cyrus entered Babylon peacefully. He respected their gods, traditions, and culture. Cyrus became famous for his policy of tolerance and mercy. Unlike many conquerors, he did not force people to adopt his religion or way of life. Instead, he allowed them to keep their own beliefs and customs. A perfect example of this is when he freed the Jewish people who had been held captive in Babylon. He allowed them to return to their homeland and rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. For this reason, the Bible even calls him a savior chosen by God. Cyrus also introduced laws that protected human rights. His principles of fairness and tolerance were written on the Cyrus cylinder, which some historians consider the world's first declaration of human rights. In it, he spoke about freedom, justice, and respect for different peoples. Under his rule, the Persian Empire stretched from the Mediterranean Sea in the west to the Indus River in the east. It became the largest empire the world had ever seen up to that point. To govern such a vast land, Cyrus created a system of provinces, each with its own governor, but all loyal to him. This system made his empire stable and successful for many years. Cyrus was also admired as a man of strong character. Ancient writers like Herodotus described him as generous, brave, and honorable. Even his enemies respected him. When he died in 530 BCE, during a military campaign, he was buried in a simple but beautiful tomb at Pasargadae, which still stands today as a symbol of his greatness. Cyrus the Great is remembered as a king who combined strength with kindness. He proved that an empire could be built not only through war, but also through respect and justice. His ideas influenced future rulers for centuries and even shaped modern concepts of human rights. Truly, Cyrus earned his place among the most powerful kings in history. King Solomon, the wise king of Israel, among all the kings, remembered in history. King Solomon of Israel stands out not only for his wealth and power, but also for his wisdom. He ruled around the 10th century BCE and was the son of King David, one of the most famous leaders in the Bible. When David died, Solomon became king, and under his rule, the kingdom of Israel reached the height of its glory. When Solomon first became king, he was still young and unsure of himself. One night, according to the Bible, God appeared to him in a dream and asked what he wanted. Instead of asking for riches or victory in battle, Solomon asked for wisdom so he could rule his people fairly. God was so pleased with this request that he not only gave Solomon wisdom, but also blessed him with wealth and honor beyond any other king of his time. Stories of Solomon's wisdom spread far and wide. One of the most famous tales is the story of the two women who came to him with a baby. Both women claimed to be the child's mother. To test them, Solomon said he would cut the baby in half and give each woman a piece. The real mother immediately cried out and begged him to give the baby to the other woman just so the child would live. Solomon then declared she was the true mother and gave the child to her. This story showed his ability to judge wisely and fairly. But Solomon's greatness was not only in his wisdom, he also built the first temple of Jerusalem, a magnificent structure that became the spiritual heart of Israel. The temple was decorated with gold, precious stones, and fine craftsmanship, and it housed the Ark of the Covenant, which held the Ten Commandments. This temple became a symbol of faith and unity for the Jewish people. Solomon's reign was also a time of great peace and prosperity. Unlike many kings who spent their rule fighting wars, Solomon made alliances through diplomacy and trade. He even married princesses from neighboring kingdoms to create peace. His most famous alliance was with the Queen of Sheba, who visited him with gifts of gold, spices, and precious stones. She was so impressed with his wisdom and wealth that her story became legendary. Under Solomon, Israel became wealthy through trade. His ships sailed the seas, bringing back treasures from faraway lands. The kingdom flourished with riches, art, music, and culture. People from all over the world traveled to see his court and hear his wisdom. However, Solomon's reign was not perfect. Toward the end of his life, he faced criticism for building too many grand projects, which placed heavy taxes and labor on his people. He also allowed foreign religions into Israel through his many marriages, which angered some of his subjects. After his death, the kingdom split into two parts, Israel and Judah, and was never as strong again. Even with these challenges, Solomon's legacy has lasted thousands of years. He is remembered as one of the wisest kings in history, and his name is often used as a symbol of wisdom, wealth, and justice. His proverbs and sayings are still read today, inspiring people with lessons about life, leadership, and fairness. King Solomon proved that a ruler's greatest power does not always come from armies or conquests. Sometimes it comes from wisdom, understanding, and the ability to make decisions that bring peace and justice to a nation. That is why he is honored as one of the most powerful kings in history. Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, the master of Europe, When people talk about powerful kings and emperors, one name that always comes up is Napoleon Bonaparte. Though he started as an ordinary soldier from the island of Corsica, he rose to become the Emperor of France and one of the most famous rulers in history. His story is one of ambition, intelligence, and determination. At the height of his power, Napoleon controlled much of Europe and changed the way wars and governments were run. Napoleon was born in 1769 on Corsica, which had just become part of France. As a boy, he was sent to military school where he showed great talent in math, strategy, and leadership. He was short in height, but he made up for it with courage and confidence. When the French Revolution broke out in 1789, France was in chaos. Kings were overthrown, nobles were losing power, and new leaders were fighting for control. This gave Napoleon the chance to rise quickly through the military ranks. By the time he was in his 20s, Napoleon had already become a general, leading armies with skill and boldness. His campaigns in Italy and Egypt made him famous across Europe. Soldiers admired him because he fought alongside them and shared their hardships. He gave powerful speeches that inspired his men, making them believe they could achieve anything. In 1799, Napoleon seized power in France through a coup, making himself first consul. A few years later, in 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of the French in a grand ceremony in Paris. This act shocked many because normally, popes crowned kings and emperors. But Napoleon placed the crown on his own head, showing that his authority came from himself, not from the church, as emperor. Napoleon was both a warrior and a reformer. He created the Napoleonic Code, a new set of laws that promoted equality, protected property, and reformed the justice system. These laws influenced countries across Europe and even later governments around the world. He also improved education, banking, and administration, turning France into a modern state. But it was on the battlefield where Napoleon became legendary. His strategies are still studied in military schools today. He used speed, surprise, and clever planning to defeat larger armies. His greatest victories included the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, where he crushed the combined forces of Austria and Russia. After that, he became known as the Master of Europe. At his height, Napoleon controlled most of continental Europe either directly or through alliances. But his ambition never stopped. In 1812, he made the mistake of invading Russia with a huge army. The campaign was a disaster. Harsh winters, lack of supplies, and strong Russian resistance destroyed most of his forces. After this, his enemies Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia united against him. Napoleon was defeated in 1814 and sent into exile on the island of Elba, but he was not done yet. In 1815, he escaped, returned to France, and gathered an army. For 100 days, he regained power until he faced the British and Prussian armies at the Battle of Waterloo. This time, he was finally defeated and sent far away to the island of St. Helena, where he spent the rest of his life until his death in 1821. Even though Napoleon eventually lost, his influence on history is undeniable. He showed how one man's ambition and brilliance could shake the world. He spread ideas of equality, modern law, and nationalism, which shaped Europe for centuries. Love him or hate him, Napoleon remains one of the most powerful rulers the world has ever known. Julius Caesar, the rise of Rome's greatest ruler. When we talk about the most powerful kings and leaders in history, few names shine brighter than Julius Caesar. He was not just a king. In fact, Rome never officially had kings during his time, but Caesar's power was so great that he ruled like one. His leadership transformed Rome from a struggling republic into the beginnings of a mighty empire that would dominate the ancient world for centuries. Julius Caesar was born in 100 BCE into a respected Roman family. From a young age, he showed ambition and intelligence. Rome at the time was full of political rivalries, corruption, and unrest. Caesar entered politics determined to rise above the chaos. He was skilled with words, charming in personality, and clever in making alliances. These talents helped him quickly climb the political ladder. But Caesar's greatest strength was as a military general. His soldiers admired him because he fought alongside them, endured the same hardships, and rewarded them generously. Through these victories, he became extremely wealthy and popular. Both with the army and the people of Rome, Caesar's military success made him a threat to other Roman leaders. The Senate, afraid of his growing power, ordered him to give up his army. Instead, in 49 BCE, Caesar made a bold decision. He marched his army across the Rubicon River into Italy, an act of open defiance. This moment is famous in history as crossing the Rubicon, which means making a decision that cannot be undone. Civil war broke out, and Caesar emerged victorious. After his victory, Caesar became the most powerful man in Rome. He was given the title of dictator for life, which gave him absolute control. As ruler, he made many important reforms. He improved the calendar, creating the Julian calendar, which is the basis of the calendar we still use today. He reduced debts, restructured the Senate, and planned new colonies to provide land for his soldiers and the poor. Caesar also showed mercy to his defeated enemies, a rare quality for rulers of his time. But not everyone was happy with his power. Many senators believed he was destroying the traditions of the Roman Republic and making himself a king. Romans hated the idea of kings, so some conspirators plotted against him. On March 15, 44 BCE, a date remembered as the Ides of March, Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators, including men he trusted like Brutus and Cassius. Caesar's death shocked Rome and the world. Instead of restoring the Republic, his assassination led to more civil wars. Eventually, his adopted heir, Octavian, later Augustus, became the first emperor of Rome. In this way, Julius Caesar's life and death marked the true beginning of the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar's legacy is enormous. He is remembered as a brilliant general, a bold politician, and a leader who changed the course of history. His name itself became a title for power. The word Caesar later evolved into Kaiser in Germany and Tsar in Russia, both meaning emperor. This shows how deeply his influence reached even centuries after his death. Julius Caesar proved that true power comes from a mix of intelligence, bravery, and the ability to inspire others. He rose from a politician in a troubled republic to the most powerful man in the world. His story is one of ambition, glory, and tragedy, making him one of the greatest rulers in history. These 10 kings changed the world with their power, vision, and leadership. But history still holds many secrets and rulers whose stories can inspire us today. Which of these great kings impressed you the most? Tell us in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss our next story. And share this video with your friends who love history. Let us spread the power of knowledge together.